Welcome back to Digital class, and this is our discussion for step 1 pollination, which is actually the first step of the processes of the sexual reproduction of flowering plants. So the first thing we need to understand is what is the definition or what is the meaning of pollination. So as we can see from here, pollination in simple terms are the transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma. Again, from the anther to the stigma. And this pollination can occur in two different types, which is a self-pollination and cross-pollination. So it's something that is actually kind of simple. Self-pollination occurs within the same flower or across the same flowers on the same plants. As long as the same plants, different flowers or within the same flower is okay. But cross-pollination, it occurs across flowers from different plants of the same kind of same species. Again, this is the keyword here is the same plant, and this is different plants. Okay, and when it comes to the method of pollination, basically this is something that's very important here. Methods of pollination. You understand that there are two ways of pollination. The first one is wind. Let me just quickly highlight here, wind. And the second way, as you can see from your notes, is actually animals. Now, because of the different methods of pollination, it actually changes how the flower looks like. Again, I repeat, because of the ways of pollination, it changes how the flower looks like. Okay, that's why winds have a different kind of characteristics, and when it comes to the we animals pollination, you have a different characteristic of the plant. So it's something that's very important to take note of. Okay, so just to take a look here on the wind pollinated flower, this is how it looks like, something like this. When it comes to animal pollinated flower, it looks like something like this. Now, if you still remember the diagram or the picture that we saw in the previous video, which is this one, this actually is the flower uh, that's animal pollinated. Okay, so let's go come back to wind pollinated flower first. So wind pollinated flower, as you can see, the flower is like kind of weird. It's not something that we use to draw, maybe in the arts and craft. Yeah, but this is wind pollinated flower. Okay, as you can see, the anther and the stigma is outside. Okay, and the flower doesn't look that nice, and the pollen grains there's a lot here. Okay, so let's look at some of the characteristic here. So the first one, pollen grains here is many, small, and light. Why? Because they are carried by wind. Again, that will make it easy for the wind to move their pollen grains around for pollination. Okay, and now the stigma and anther, why this one is like coming out? They are sticking out of the petals. Why out? Again, to make sure that the wind can easily carry the pollen grains from one flower to another. Because anther produce the pollen grains, right? That's why it's easier to go out. Okay. Now the stigma, the same thing, but this stigma is large and feathery. Why? Because stigma, the function is to receive the pollen grains. That's why it should be bigger, larger, so that it have a larger surface area and it's easier to catch the pollen grain. Now the flower, you notice that this flower is not that nice, it's small, dull color, scentless. Why? Because they don't need to be nice to attract the pollinators or like the animal because it's used by wind. So there's no reason for these features. Okay, as insect is not involved here, not involved here. It's only wind. Okay, so as you can see some of the pictures, a nice picture here. These are some of the example of flowers that go through wind pollination. Okay, now the next one, which is something that we very used to it, is this animal pollinated flowers. Okay, so you can see here, um, we have a nice petal here. This is what we usually draw in arts and craft class, right? So you can see there's a pollinator that's coming because it's animals, right? Animal pollinated flower. So pollen grain is usually have hooks or stiff hair. Again, pollen grains are hooks or stiff hair, which is different from here. Here, the wind pollinated is many small line, but here is hook or stiff hair. Okay? Why pollen grains in animal pollinated flower is not like many small line? Again, it's not by wind, but by the pollinator, which is example like the bees. And this with this hook or stiff hair is because they want to make sure, again, it's very important to look at here, make sure the pollen stick to the animal's body covering. Again, the pollen grain is stick to the pollinator or the animal's body covering and get carried to where it is needed for pollination. Something is very important to take note is here, okay? Now, I just want to clarify something. Example, you know that there's example B, right? This is B. Example, this is B. B will attract by flower. The example is flower. And it will actually basically get the what? The nectar, like the nectar. But actually at the same time, you will get nectar plus the pollen. Now, this is actually used for what? This nectar and pollen is actually used to give them some food, lah, okay? In simple. But what is important is there are actually also other pollen that stick to the body covering. And these are the one that is actually kind of important for pollination. Okay, again, just to clarify again, bees collect nectar and pollen actually for food. Yes, it's correct, but mainly nectar. But yeah, but these pollen grains that stick to it is the one that is mainly used for pollination. Okay, so the next one, stigma. As you can see, stigma is for what? It's actually to receive the pollen grain. So it is sticky. Why? To make sure the pollen doesn't easily fall off of the animal's body and it gets safely transferred to the flower stigma. Okay? Stick. Okay? Next part, petals. So petals is large and colorful. Why? To attract the pollinators, like bees to come, birds to come. And of course, their flower, in simple terms, the nectary, it produces sweet and smell nectar, again, to attract pollinators, as I've explained here in this small little drawings here. Okay, so as you can see, this is what we learned in the previous video, and that is actually this animal pollinated flower. Okay, so we are done for the discussion for this session, step 1 pollination. But again, it's very important for you to know this part, methods of pollination. There's wind, there's animals, and again, the way the flower looks is different because of the methods of pollination too. Okay, something important to take note. Thank you. See you. Bye bye.